Hey everyone, Joe here. This is the final part of my recent chat with Johannes from Aligned Games. Here we talk about whether you should buy and use asset packs yourself, and make some recommendations for customizing them to maintain a unique identity. We also talk about making and selling your own assets as an additional revenue stream. I'll be releasing the full hour-plus conversation soon if you prefer that format.
To me, the worry comes in specifically with the second part of my revenue, which I want to shift to, which is asset creation. I'm just going to give you a little note. I think we're not going to have enough time to do the YouTube stuff, so let's pen that in for another
That's
one.
Fine.
So we're going to talk about assets a little bit, and then we'll finish off with assets. So I started out in Unity about 13, 14 years ago, and at that point, I was doing a lot of tutorials and learning a bunch of stuff and seeing how things work, starting to make prototypes and stuff like that. And I'm self-taught, so I've never been to university for this. I've been to university, but for other things. I've never been to university for this. I've never been in any formal development class or anything like that. So I am extremely self-taught, and that comes with needing to find alternate ways to maximize your revenue away from just releasing games. If you're someone like me that just wants to do this, so you have no other job, this is your job, you make games and you find ways to make money from your games. And one such a way for me has been three-dimensional assets. So I started out with this also about a decade ago. I started out doing work for clients, which turned out to be mostly level design and 3D work, and I still do that because that's probably a third of my income. So this is just interesting to people, so I'm just going to say, so my income is split into three. It is freelance work, which is 3D stuff for other companies or people. It is assets, and then it is game sales. And I hope that in the future I can add another one, which would be YouTube or perhaps Patreon or something like that. But that's something that, has become very popular as well. So it's becoming, we can talk about that as well in some other one, but it's become very difficult to get that fourth revenue stream. But as for the asset ones, it's been a very up and down ride for me. So this is, of course, talking about making assets and selling them. But another part of the conversation is, should you use assets that other people have made? And my answer is automatically yes, because I sell them.
Yeah, you've got a vested interest in that.
Yeah, even though I don't necessarily agree with that, which is interesting because I will never use a 3D asset made by someone else. I would even go so far as to not use audio, and the only thing that I don't even really use systems, to be honest with you. I do use systems that are out of my reach, out of my creative capabilities, such as volumetrics, so that I will use. But anything that I am capable of making, I will make, and this has been to my detriment. So what is your take?
There's a couple of different things here. Let's start with the making assets to sell. Now, I have considered that. I don't do that myself, partially because I just haven't been making my own assets for very long. I'm still learning the process. Like, heck, I just UV unwrapped my first model like a few weeks ago.
Okay.
I'd been avoiding it. I'm like, no textures in my game because I don't know how to do that.
Okay.
I'm still going to keep the low no texture style, but I do know how to UV unwrap now because I wanted to have a shader that still needed UVs for dynamic camouflage.
Now,
anyway,
doesn't matter, but do you unwrap yourself or do you use an auto unwrapper?
My models are simple enough where I can kind of do a little of both, where I have it you sort of do whatever the default unwrap is, and then it's terrible, and then I just sort of massage it until it's close to what I need. This is one of those things where having a really low fidelity game helps, because I don't need super precise things like UV maps that are perfect and all that stuff. Anyway, but my point was that I'm still learning the process of like what's good topology on a model, like how should it be, how should you set up the UVs? What about like there's a bunch of stuff I'm not using. You got like normal maps and bump maps and occlusion maps and all kinds of maps for all these different assets, and I'm not at the point yet where I would feel comfortable attempting to sell a model because I just don't know what the general person needs out of a model. I'm starting to learn, so I could get there at some point.
Yeah, and this is to go back to the Unity discussion. This is where it became such a difficult thing for me because, like you said, you have your diffuse maps, which are albedo maps. You can do textures in atlas styles, or you can give them their own texture maps. You need filtered normal maps, you need normal maps, you need specular maps, you need ambient occlusion maps, you need, for some models, emission, lighting maps, and then you have to bake them. So it is a very complicated process, so you do need to have some experience to sell them. And this is where things like PBR rendering have become such an irritant to me, because now you need metallic maps, you need to know the metallic workflow. You need to know what people want out of these things, as you said. So there's a lot of consideration, and now there's 3 pipelines for this. So yeah, it's been tough.
Right, and then if you want to sell your assets on multiple game engines, like sell it on the Unreal Store or whatever, it gets even more complicated. There's a little bit of the should you make your own game engine versus using an off-the-shelf one here. There's a little bit of a shade of that, in the sense that when you make your own game engine, you don't have to make a general purpose game engine. That's a huge task. You can make an engine that's really specific to just what your game needs to do, and you don't have to do anything else. And the tools can be as clunky as you can tolerate. Same way with the assets. Like, my game has a really specific set of constraints and tolerances and art style that I'm going for. So when I make a model or an asset for the game, it can be really laser targeted at exactly what I need and nothing more. But does that asset sell on the asset store? Are people happy with it? Do they leave bad reviews? Whatever, I don't know. So that's an angle to it as well, why I haven't gone that route yet. Now, I may at some point, once I get more comfortable with my workflow. One other thing that's worth considering is, especially if you're sort of thinking like, how can I leverage the assets I'm already making for my current game? Because, okay, yes, like making assets that you're just going to sell, that's a separate thing. But if I was like, well, I spent all this time modeling this tank or this jet or this helicopter, could I sell it? I have a specific style that I'm going for. How would I feel if I saw that very asset show up in some other game, and like, let's say that game does well, or is like, hey, the viral helicopter game uses my helicopter as its asset, and I only got $20 for it. But they made $1 million.
It's so funny that you're saying this, because I've been struggling with the same thing, and I've finally given in, because I do need to put my revenue first, because I do have bills to pay. So if you don't mind, Joe, I want you to do something quick.
Okay.
Google Grunt 1914. And when you get it up, I'm going to try and remember. I'm going to put it up on the screen for everyone to see. So this was the first game that I ever made. It's not the best game in the world. It was a stupid game to try and make. But I made more than $10,000. Let's just say that, from the sales, which is not a lot, by the way.
Wow!
But it's
still
it's
okay.
Not
zero.
It's not zero.
More than a lot of people make.
Yeah, a lot of people expect $100,000. A lot of people expect $500. It made a little bit of money, but it didn't make enough money for 3 years of development, obviously.
Right. Yeah. So, like below minimum wage kind of stuff.
Exactly. So, because a lot of people hear $10,000 and they think, wow, that's not bad. But you have to consider, this is something that is such a big undertaking. Like, let me put it into context. This game has to be more than 250 custom-made models, each with everything that we just spoke about. It had 17 levels. It had like over 30, 40 guns. It is just a ridiculous amount of things that I did for this. And it didn't make sense, but I was still new to it. If I could go back, I would do it so differently, but I learned a lot. But the point of this is, I want you to do something else now, Joe. Go to Sketchfab and just search for aligned games for a second.
Okay.
If you open that up, you'll see I've been posting models of tanks, World War One tanks.
I see weapons. Let's see.
Yeah, just go to my most recent.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Yeah, so those are from that game. That game released in 2019. And it's been such a struggle for me mentally to be able to get over this hurdle of I need to release these assets. I need to make more money from this because I spent that time and I need to, for one, make more money, and for two, grow my audience. And doing this kind of thing will grow your audience because more people will see your things. And so it's interesting to me that you brought it up because it is sort of like it becomes like your baby, and seeing it in someone else's project might be hard, but I've finally taken the step of now releasing that, and I'm going to release all 17 of those levels as well and sell those as well. So right now those are free, so if you want to grab them, you can grab them, to anyone listening. But you do need to make money from your projects. So if you're a little bit like me and you have mental issues with things that you made, I think a lot of people are probably this way. You will need to find ways to maximize your revenue. And for me, it's been getting over my mental hurdle. And so I think what I'm saying is I'm proud of myself for finally letting go of that project and being willing to sell those.
Yeah, that's a good idea, I think. And there's definitely an element of being sort of a scrappy, frugal indie where just just to use a turn of phrase, using every part of the buffalo. Have you heard this phrase?
Yeah.
Nothing goes to waste. Like if it's an old game and it's not making you money anymore and you're not really heavily supporting it anymore, but there's useful assets in there, like who doesn't need new low poly guns or something like that for their game? You might as well make use of them. So I probably will get over that at some point in the future as well. I'm not super tied to the individual units or anything as like, oh, this is so important to the identity of my game that I can't let anybody have it. Like it's just a low poly tank. Like it's not.
Yeah, but I think the difference
attached to it.
is making a first-person game where everything needs to be detailed and you sit and model those things yourself, which
don't
do that if you are making a game. Just buy them from suckers like me, because you're just going to be spending so much time.
Yeah, and transitioning into that, since we're going to talk about should you buy your own assets, and obviously you said you have your own opinions on that you should. I've definitely resisted that in the past. Some of my early devlogs talk about really struggling with the idea that if I can't have a big hand in the way that my game looks, that I feel like it's not mine. I feel like I'm just following. I'm well past that point now. I'm not like, oh, I'm just following the tutorial. I'm not a real game developer. I don't know how to do this. I'm well past that point. I've grown past it, fortunately. But I do still feel that urge to, I really want it to be something that I made, because I get enjoyment out of that. There's more cohesion in that. One of the things that I think can be a little bit tough with trying to sort of kit bash together a game out of assets is that it can look kit bashed. It can look like sort of a hodgepodge of styles.
A lack of cohesion.
Lack of cohesion. My boy Dom Zero, a guy who's asked me some advice on his devlog. One of the feedback items that I gave him, and again, this is Medieval Immortal, I think is the name of the game. I'm just going to keep plugging it and sending him some people. One of the pieces of feedback that I gave him was that because it seems like he's using a lot of assets, that the visuals for me felt sort of like this is kit bashed out of parts, and that turned me off visually, in terms of like how interested would I be if I saw the game and didn't know who this guy was? Would I just say, oh, that kind of looks like the icons style doesn't match the model style. They just look like they're from two completely different games because they're probably from two completely different asset packs by different developers or by different asset vendors. And I might click away and be like, oh, well, that makes the game feel low quality to me, so I don't think there's anything else to look at. Now, maybe you're wrong about that. And the more I looked, I was like, wow, there's actually a lot here. He's doing a lot of stuff on the mechanics side. I think it's very easy for programmers to really, dive deep into the mechanics and want to do all the mechanical stuff and have all the cool systems, but they're just, well, I don't, I can't draw, I'm not an artist, but whatever, so I'm going to outsource that. And you can, but I think you have to be very careful about selection.
Yeah.
And be very picky about, does this match cohesively? Another thing to consider is how complete is the pack. If you buy a pack of vehicles, let's say, like I did, and you need vehicles that aren't in that pack, can you easily get them in a matched style from some other pack?
That's probably going to be tough.
Create them yourself, that sort of thing. So I think that's something to consider.
That last part you said is interesting, because let's be honest, if you're someone that is buying assets, you probably can't create them yourself, not to the level that you're buying them, because this isn't true for all assets, but the bar for quality has been raised. When I started making assets, there was a lot of just absolute nonsense on the asset stores, but over time Unity have become a lot more picky. Places like Sketchfab, you can upload whatever you want, but people are not going to like the ones that are not good, and so they're never going to get the the return viewers. So you probably can't make something. Some people can, but make something that you've purchased if you do need something else out of that pack. So do be mindful of that, I think.
Yeah. One of the reasons that I picked the low poly, as you call it, polygonal style in the first place was that I thought that I could, with enough time invested into skilling up on it, could fill in the gaps of, like, let's say, and I did buy a few packs from Cinti for the like military vehicles and things like that.
Yeah.
That I could fill in the gaps, and well, they have, a Russian tank, but they don't have a Russian helicopter. Will I be able to do that? At this point, I think yes.
So you've kind of worked up to being able to do it.
Yeah. Now, not to the level that they do it, especially with they have like two tiers of packs. They've got like the simple pack, and then they've got like I think they call it their poly, is their line. And those vehicles are actually really, really detailed. They're honestly too detailed for my game, even though they're still low poly style.
Yeah.
Because I think they're optimized for like a first person shooter level game where you're like, that's the scale of things. So when you take an FPS low poly tank and shrink it down to like a tiny RTS tank, it's like, well, that just looks like a high poly tank now.
Yeah, exactly.
So I need to do the weird thing of, I bought some asset packs and I'm gonna be like downsampling them manually in a way of saying, okay, I've got this highly detailed tank model from them, and I need to like cut it down for parts and simplify the model, simplify the look. But that's okay. I can do that now.
Yeah. So I think what it comes down to then is if you need another revenue stream, if you're someone like me that is not doing a job apart from your development, then you probably do need to look at selling them, but do find something that fits your skill set quite well, because it doesn't make sense to try and sell audio assets if you are good at creating networking sort of systems. So find something that fits your niche and something that will make a bit of money, because this is a mistake that I've made as well, is selling things that no one was interested in. But on the other hand, I've sold things that happen to have a lot of interest as well. But do follow trends and sort of stay on top of it, because I'm someone that falls victim to only doing things that I want to do, but sometimes you're just going to have to give that up. Sometimes you're going to have to do things that aren't necessarily fun, which I do struggle with, but I've been getting better at it. And the same is true for your game as well. It's not always going to be the things that you do want to do.
Yeah. One other thing I'd like to say on buying assets and using them for your games. Like, obviously, if you're just making projects for fun, or you're making game jams or whatever, like, go nuts, use whatever assets you want.
Yeah.
But if you do plan on trying to throw your hat into the ring of selling a game, or, kind of like I am, I think it's important that whatever assets you do get, you have to be... One other thing I think you have to be careful about is, if your game has no identity of its own, I think people can detect that. And I think the place where this comes up the most importantly is characters, and especially faces of characters. So it's very easy for me now. Maybe it's not as easy for just normal gamers, because since I'm a developer, I'm in the space. But when I see a prototype for a game or a new devlog comes out, I can spot those Cinti character face models from a mile away. I'm like, this is using an asset pack. And that immediately makes it, to me, feel less unique, feel less like it has its own identity. Not to hate on Cinti. I bought plenty of packs from them. They're obviously, like you said, they're a big seller. I did see somebody on Twitter kind of drag them a little bit and said Cinti is the Comic Sans of game assets.
It's kind of true, though.
Really,
they've sort of
really harsh.
fallen victim to their own success now.
Yeah, in a way. But I think, honestly, the biggest tell there is the characters, and specifically the faces. Like, if you're using a prop from a pack like that, like, nobody's going to know. A weapon, even.
Well, I think other developers might know, but I don't think you need to worry about that.
That I'm less worried about.
That is not your target market. So do customize it a little bit. Like Joe says, faces are kind of a big tell. But there's a lot of things you can do. I mean, you don't need to know how to use Photoshop to just change the hue on a texture. You can make a lot of little changes to things to sort of end up making big changes. Change the color space a little bit, change the way that Unity renders your stuff, play around with your environmental settings, and just make a game feel a little bit more unique. I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, and especially on the face side of things, like, you could buy a pack and then just kind of, come up with, like, what's your style for facial features. Like, you adjust the way the eyes or the ears or the mouths or noses or whatever look, and now you've got your unique style, but you didn't have to make a whole asset yourself. Like, you paid Cinti to rig it and texture it and whatever else, but you adjusted the faces so that they have your game's identity. I guess would be having never done any character stuff ever, that would be my recommendation.
Well,
is change the faces.
As someone that has done character design for some AA studios in the past, I'll tell you this: stay away from trying to make characters, because it's just a nightmare, especially animation. That's not what this chat is about, but.
Yeah, it's not an accident that my game doesn't have any characters at all.
Yeah, it's not an easy thing to do. I think that's why you're seeing a lot of these sort of these bipedal, not bipedal, animal design games that are doing quite well, and also these cozy games, because it's simple art styles and it's quick development turnover time, and it's unique because you just make it your own. There's a bunch of ways to do that. So I think, Joe, if you don't have too much more to say, I think that's a good place to sort of leave this one on, and we'll quickly afterwards discuss some of the future topics, because we have a couple more of these coming.
Oh yeah, we got a bunch of stuff we didn't get to, but that's
okay. It's a little bit difficult having only an hour, but I'm enjoying this, so we don't really need to stop until we have exhausted our thoughts, which will probably be never.
I will always have something to talk about, right? There's always something.
But for this one, it was definitely a fun chat. I enjoyed it. A little bit more exciting than some of the previous topics to me, getting into some of the stuff that I enjoy with the assets and all of that. So, thanks for the chat. I enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to the next ones as well.
Yeah. Appreciate it as always. I'll see you next time.
Okay, sounds good. Cheers.